Welcome to Paint Ed. PCA provides painting contractors with connections they need to grow their business. To find out more and to become a member, visit pcapainted.org. Find more great content just like this on PCA Overdrive. A subscription to the platform is included with membership. For all you non-members out there, sign up for a free trial. PCA Overdrive is available on the App Store and Google Play.
This episode is brought to you by Bayer.
Popovich created a culture of belonging and purpose with his players on the Spurs. Players would take pay cuts just to stay there. They weren't just earning a paycheck. They were part of something bigger. So, are you providing a transactional relationship to your employees or a long-term relational one? Welcome back to the Elite Business Advice podcast. My name is Chris Moore, the founder of Elite Business Advisors, the host of the EBA podcast. So here's my question for you today. What if your best painter is actually your next best crew lead and you're unknowingly holding them back? We're going to do a little bit of a case study today on the San Antonio Spurs. And before I get into this, I need you to understand one thing. I am not a huge NBA person, mostly because we don't have a team here in St. Louis. I didn't grow up around it, although I guess you could say the opposite with soccer. It doesn't matter. I love basketball. I love March Madness that we're in the middle of right now. Probably still will be by the time this comes out. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm like the San Antonio Spurs expert and all this stuff. But there's a guy named Greg Popovich. And he's built a leadership pipeline within the San Antonio Spurs. And I was reading something about this the other day, and I started digging into it and doing some research. And I was like, this would actually be fun and something that easily parallels in with our painting companies, okay? And so they built arguably one of the greatest kind of leadership pipelines in sports history. And it wasn't because they signed superstars, but it's because they developed the players they already had. Greg Popovich was their coach for a very, very long time. He recently, I believe 1 or 2 years ago, started having some health complications, so he kind of got out of the coaching side of it and is still very involved in the basketball operations and in a presidential, I think he's the president of the Spurs, actually. I looked it up and then I've already forgot, so my bad. But he built a leadership pipeline dating back all the way to like 1996. And it wasn't because he recruited the biggest names, but it's because they built a culture where overlooked and undervalued players were developed into elite performers. A couple of their, top players were not first number 1 overall draft picks. They weren't top 10 overall draft picks. Manu Ginobili, if anybody is a basketball fan, was the 57th overall draft pick. That means he was at the very end of the second round, effectively the 57th, quote, best or most talented prospect that year. Tony Parker, another one, was the 28th overall pick, which means, again, 28th best, very end of the first round, and that was probably because they won the championship the year before or got very far in the finals and had one of the last draft picks in each round. And so these guys became world-class champions under this system that Popovich had. And so I'm going to go through this system with you guys today. It's kind of 5 pieces of the culture that was created to develop people and what you should be looking for in your employees, right? Because the goal with them was to create a repeatable system. Here's where I think this gets really interesting. And kind of their philosophy was, to identify potential, to teach culture first, to give increasing responsibility that they earned and promote from within, okay? But here's the part that I think is most fascinating about this whole thing is they won 5 championships over 15 years with rotating rosters. And what I mean by that was it wasn't that they had one player. It wasn't, think back into the 90s and 2000s when the Lakers had Shaq and Kobe. and like they had a core together. And of course, they'd have some people rotating in and out over the years, but they won 5 championships in 15 years with rosters that were turning over. And that was just further proof that the system outlasted any single player. And so my thought for you is this before we dive into it. Your crew is full of the Manu Ginobilis out there in the world, the 58th best choice at the time, okay? The painter who shows up early, that keeps their area clean, that quietly problem solves on the job. That might be your next crew leader. That might be your next rock star. But my question for you is, are you developing them or are you just using them? So I hope it helps. Thank you guys for plugging in. This is the Elite Business Advice Podcast. All right, so I'm going to dive right into these 5 points with you guys here today. Point number 1, we have to spot the right person. And what do I mean by that? We have to know what we're looking for in somebody that has potential within our company. Okay? A lot of times you're not going to realize this at the interview. I think there's things that you can look for. I think there's things that you can try to do to weed out or to figure out, like, is this somebody with potential? But at the end of the day, we have to, as they get into our company, we have to find that they are the right person. Okay. Again, going back to the Spurs, Popovich didn't look for the flashiest player, the best player, the person with the most talent. What he looked for was 3 things. He looked for somebody with high character, coachability, and unselfishness. Right? He knew that he could develop talent if they were coachable, if they weren't selfish, and that they would fit into the system of basketball and strategy that they ran. When people showed up, followed through on what they said they were going to do, listened to coaches, took direction, and they were there for the team, he knew that he could make them into elite talent. Okay. I think a thing for a lot of people, we talk about this a lot, hire on characteristics, not on skills. You may have somebody that could be literally the best painter in the entire world in terms of quality and efficiency and whatever. But like, if they're always showing up late, if they rub everybody the wrong way, if nobody wants to work with them, they piss off half your team, your customers don't like them, then what? Like, it doesn't really matter, right? You can develop people into world-class painters. Maybe world-class even seems too extreme here. You can develop people into amazing, efficient, quality painters with the right systems in place, okay? And so focus on finding the right person. What I would look for is this. Do they take initiative without being asked? Again, you may not be able to uncover that in an interview, but within a pretty short amount of time working in your company, you can start to see these things. Do other painters naturally look to them like for leadership, right? You're going to have some people that are a little bit more naturally born leaders than others, right? It can be developed, but I think sometimes, people just carry that charisma with them. Do they communicate problems instead of hiding them? That's a big one. Again, character and integrity is everything in my opinion. Do they care about the quality of their work? Do they care when they make a mistake? Do they own when they make a mistake? When you point something out to them, what is their feedback? Is it like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do better next time? Or it's like, hey, I'm really sorry about that. Like, I totally dropped the ball. And they'll even be the first one to be like, can I get some more training on this to make sure I'm like learning the tips and the tricks to do this better, faster, whatever? Okay. So I got some like kind of action items on each of these points for you guys this week. My action item for you on this one, watch your crew with fresh eyes. Again, not who paints the fastest, but who leads without a title, who's doing and looking for all those little intrinsic things that might be the next elite performer in your company. Okay. Number 2, teach culture before skills. The Spurs, every person that was brought in, whether it was a star, a rookie, whoever it was, every single person that signed on to play basketball for them learned the Spurs way first. System over superstar, okay? Their culture became non-negotiable because there was a way that they did everything. I'd say used to probably witness the Cardinals, a baseball team here in St. Louis, the exact same thing. They had what was called the Cardinal way. and it was a culture that existed. It was the people that came into the organization learned the Cardinal way. Okay, arguably they've lost it a little bit. If you followed them the last couple of years, they're missing some steps right now. We got a really young talent, and I see some management changes happening, and I see some of the veteran players getting involved again that were here during those years of the Cardinal way. I know Molina's coming back, and they're kind of bringing Wainwright in some different capacities, and so I think there's some hope to get back onto the Cardinal way because they definitely lost it. But it's all about culture. When you think about these teams, these organizations, I know Gary Chupik's going to talk a lot about that during our VIP at our retreat later this summer, shameless plug. But a lot of these elite organizations that build championship rosters, it's because they built championship culture first. And so for you guys, like, your culture is the standard. And your culture is everything in how you communicate with homeowners, how job sites are left at the end of the day, how problems are reported and resolved. A crew lead who doesn't carry your culture will quietly start to erode everything you've worked towards. Okay. And so we need to make sure that the culture is solid, that people are bought into the culture and the systems that you have. And if they're not, I'm going to just tell you, at some point it's going to not work out well. And hopefully they don't do too much harm, in the process or on the way out. Again, we're seeing it with the Cardinals. They've lost their way a little bit, and there's a variety of factors. I'm not going to turn this into that. But you guys need to understand, what is your culture. I was talking to Dr. Jeff Cornwall. Some of you guys met him at Expo this year. Nick's mentor that he did the session with. He's our business coach too. It's Maggie Kuiper's dad. And we were talking recently about, like, our culture and stuff. And as we're getting our office, and Stuart will be here later this summer and everything, we're talking about, like, the culture that we have, right? And he mentioned something really interesting in passing in our conversation as we were dissecting, like, what does our culture look like? And he said, people have to understand, are you a culture of performance or a culture of, I forget the other word he used, kind of like family, right? And I'll just use that as an example. And he was like, they're like, when it's all about results and numbers and stuff, and we're not completely that way, but it was an interesting perspective that, like, that is a culture, right? And you will probably have some turnover because you're less relational, more transactional, right? It's about the numbers that need hit and this, and there's no right or wrong way to it, right? But think about it. If your culture in your company is all about, my estimators have to perform in this and that and hit numbers and GP and like, it's very data driven, which we all know I love, and it should be. But when it's too much about the data and not about the human, that is a culture that you have. And again, it's not good, bad, or indifferent, but it's a culture in and of itself, right? If too much emphasis is put on performance. So just think about that as you're thinking about what kind of culture do you have. We need to have a culture of results. It's a business. This isn't a non-for-profit that you guys are running. So we need to have a culture of results, but like, to what emphasis is being put first? Is it on performance and results, or is it on people and culture and being a good place that people want to come work? Again, you can have both, but understand kind of which one you're prioritizing. Okay. My action item for you on this one: before you give somebody a title or a role, can they clearly articulate your company's standards, right? I think you should write down your kind of top 5 non-negotiables, and all of your employees need to know them at any given time. Okay. That is how you start to create a culture. Maybe that's your core values. Maybe that it's, it should probably be an adjacent to your core values, honestly. But everybody should know that. At Red Robin, we literally used to have them embroidered into the sleeve on our shirts, were our 4 core values. I used to know them. I have not worked at Red Robin in almost, 16 years, 15 years. But I used to know them at one point. But I can't tell you what is on a Royal Red Robin burger still. So moving on. Point number 3. Give responsibility in stages. Okay. With the Spurs, their rookies didn't start on the main stage. They earned the minutes. They earned the roles. They earned the full leadership responsibility over time. Trust was built through reps and practice and going through the motions, okay? For you, your crew leaders should earn that responsibility over time, okay? Give them a small crew of one. Let them go lead one painter, right? No, step one, can they do a job by themselves? Can they lead themselves to success? Right? I always joke, could they lead a silent prayer? Okay? Can they lead themselves to success doing a project on their own? Great. Awesome. Then can they lead one other person doing another small project between them, right? And then maybe can they lead two people, okay? Let them then run the job start to finish. You're just checking in on it. And then give them full ownership of it. They show up, they start the job. They go through, they do the communication every day. They're reviewing it with you at the close. They're doing the walkthrough. They're doing it all, okay? You don't just go from, hey, you're a painter to, hey, you're going to show up and start this job, make sure this goes to completion, we're on budget, you communicate with the client. Like, you don't go from there to there. You give them small incremental steps along the way, okay? So my action item for this one, I don't feel like this one needs a whole lot of additional context. Pick one person that you kind of have your eye on to test out their leadership ability and readiness within the next month, even if it's sending them to go paint a bedroom and bathroom by themselves. Can they do that? If they can do that, and even if you show up on day one, here's everything you need, great, have this done by the end of the day, grab the homeowner free leave, make sure everything's good, right? Here's our job, close out SOP, follow it. Again, this is where our SOPs and systems come in really handy. But can they do that, right? Test somebody out. If somebody can do that, great. Give them one painter. Test out that next step, right? Sometimes we don't know. It doesn't have to be a full-blown, hey, you're a crew leader all of a sudden. No, hey, we want to throw you in here. Not throw you in here. We want to put you out in this role and just kind of see how it goes. Like, we're going to need another crew lead at some point later on this year, and we just want to test out and see how things go. You can tell them it's okay, right? Point number 4, coach through mistakes. I hate to tell you this, but they're going to make mistakes. We all do. We're human. Nobody's perfect, okay? When players on the Spurs made mistakes, this is where I think Greg Popovich really shined as a coach, and really walked the culture line well, because he was famously hard on his players. Like, if you look back at interviews and interactions and all these different things, he was always kind of hard on his players, but he always had a why behind it, right? He didn't just correct behavior. He really kind of explained the reasoning so the players could self-correct themselves in the future. That's key. Being hard on your employees is one thing, but being hard on your employees with a why and explaining it so they can take care of it themselves in the future, it's a lot better, right? It's a lot easier to take, and also it's a lot better, so then you shouldn't have to always be correcting them. And if you're always having to correct the same behavior and mistakes, you're going to see who's, again, the right fit and not the right fit in your company. Okay. If people are self-correcting themselves, you're off to a good start. I think for most business owners, truthfully, like they try to correct the outcome, but leaders are going to kind of coach the thinking behind it, right? A lot of people say, well, don't let that happen again. And I'm probably guilty of this in parenting too, truthfully, right? But instead of asking the questions, walk me through what happened and what you do differently next time. Just a simple shift. Hey, don't make that mistake again. Hey, I've told you 3 times, stop doing that, right? Instead, hey, how could we maybe do that differently? We're really trying hard to do that with our kids right now, right? Like, instead of like, hey, don't scream and yell at your brother, it's like, hey, bud, how could we maybe communicate differently? And he'll realize, and I'll go, oh, hey, Cooper, can I please have that? And 90% of the time, Cooper just gives it back to him because he's a sweetheart, usually. 10% he doesn't, and that leads to a whole nother escalation that we deal with. But like trying to understand, like, how could we handle this differently, right? And again, this is just a combination of probably Instagram reels we've watched and books that we've read. So if anybody has any ideas, please DM me. But that question in a business setting is going to build leaders. Correction in and of itself builds dependent upon you, your project manager, whoever. Okay. So the next time something goes wrong on a job, don't be Mr. Fix-It. Ask them the question instead. Hey, what could we have done differently? What would you do differently if this happened again? And then you problem solve it with them. If they say, well, I think I'd probably do this. And if you have a different idea or a better idea that you think is worth bringing up, then say, yeah, no, like I think you're right there. Maybe what I would do is this. And they're going to go, oh yeah, you're right. That's great. Cool. And then hope it never has to happen again, but it's going to. And then we're going to see, did they learn from it? And again, with myself as a parent, with our kids, like we finally had an aha moment the other day. Something happened. Cooper did something. Chase wanted to just yell, get really worked up about it. Like that's just a snap reaction. I don't know where he gets it from. And then like he started to, and I watched it, and I started to say something, and then I saw it in him. He caught himself, and he kind of did like a little half breath. And he goes, Cooper, can I please, whatever it was. And I was like, oh my God. After 75 times of having the conversation of how could we handle this differently, it finally clicked. Okay. So good news for you. You don't employ 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds right now for another week. You don't employ them. Hopefully people are a little more mature along in their thinking. So I'm getting off track here. Point 5, make leadership worth it for them. Okay. One of my favorite things, Popovich created a culture of belonging and purpose with his players on the Spurs. Players would take pay cuts just to stay there. They weren't just earning a paycheck. They were part of something bigger. So are you providing a transactional relationship to your employees or a long-term relational one? That's my question for you. That is the key to having the culture. Are people less worried about the money? We need to make it good. We want to provide a good opportunity. I love the employee bonus, resource and pay for performance. I love the idea to be able to do that. But at the end of the day, are they just there for the money, or is it about a bigger purpose? Is it about the company, the culture, whatever that culture is for you? Again, results driven, family driven. Again, probably a better term out there, but you understand where my mind's at in those two dichotomies. Okay. A title without a reward is a burden. Keep that in mind. It's a really important note. Sometimes people are like, well, can I promote them but not pay them more? Probably not. Just going to be honest, right? If you're giving me the option to show up and paint every day, or show up and paint every day and manage people and talk to customers, make sure our job site goes well, and do quality control checks and collect final payment, do walkthroughs, clean up every day, be in charge of all these people, and you're not going to pay me anymore? Like, I'm just going to show up and paint every day, right? Like, think about it. Like, I know that sounds really like dumb, but it's true. We get that question sometimes. I'm not saying it's a dumb question, but like, it's just something we don't think about. Like, we think, oh yeah, we can just give them their responsibility. Again, one day is a different story, but every day is a whole different ballgame. Okay. So we need to compensate them for the added responsibility, even in small incremental doses as they're moving along that ladder. We called it the 5 levels of a crew leader. I know we did an episode on that a long time ago. But we want to recognize, publicly, praise in public, criticize in private, right? Give people a voice in decision. Show them, I think when you're recruiting, you should be showing them a career path, that this is an opportunity to grow, that there's vision and potential here. It's not just a job. Okay. So my call to action on this one, and then I'll bring this whole thing home. Have a direct conversation with somebody that's a potential crew lead about their goals. What do they want? Where do they want this to go? Even if there's no intention of doing it now, right? Maybe it's like, hey, at some point this year we're gonna need another crew leader, and I just kind of having some discussions with you and see if it's something you'd be interested in. Like, not gonna promise anything. Like, we definitely do some training and some testing in the meantime before we just put you in that role. So we don't want to set you up for failure. But it starts with a conversation, right? It's planting seeds. It's having a conversation. It's casting vision, right? Maybe that person's about to go look for another job because they're afraid maybe they've plateaued. And just you having that conversation, even if it's 3 to 4 months down the road, it keeps them there, right? And so I would encourage you to do that. And so as we bring this plane to land, again, not a massive Spurs fan, just thought it was a really cool story. I've obviously known a lot of the story with Popovich and his leadership and the impressiveness behind it. And it was cool to dig in and do some research on this, and I hope the parallel has been helpful. But like, what I would just say is this: like, develop a system similar to what the Spurs did. right? Look for the right people. Vet them as best as you can in the interview. Look for the right things they're doing in your company. Teach them culture first. Give them responsibility in stages. Coach their thinking, not just their actions. And then most importantly, make it worth it for them. We want to build champions, and we're not going to do that just because we hire champions. We're going to build them in the process. And arguably, it's probably one of the best ways that you can do this long term. And so have a process on how do you develop your employees? How do you invest into them? How do you develop them? And how do you create a healthy culture around it in the meantime? Thanks for plugging into this week's episode. I hope you're able to take a few nuggets away from it to implement into your business. Remember, knowledge without implementation is useless. If you're curious about what we do and how we help painting contractors all over North America, schedule a free business analysis meeting with us at www.elitebusinessadvisors.com. Our entire team of advisors have ran and managed painting companies just like myself and are here to help support you on your journey. We have packages available for contractors at every stage of business, from flying solo and just starting out, all the way to multi-million-dollar businesses. And lastly, if you loved this episode, please leave us a rating and a review. It helps others on the platform find our podcast, and it could be the best blessing that's ever happened to them thanks to you. Thanks for plugging in, and we'll see you back for next week's episode.
Paint Ed podcasts are produced by the Painting Contractors Association and are made possible by members and industry partners. To find out more about the upcoming educational opportunities or for more information about joining the PCA, visit pcapainted.org.